Thank you, Zach. And Chris, that was a One Handkerchief song. I'm really excited to talk about what I'm going to talk about today. Do you have a soul tribe? I'm pretty sure that all of us do a little bit right here. This is our soul tribe. And when I started thinking about soul tribes, I immediately, like many of you probably, went to the early Christian desert fathers, right? Isn't that immediately where you went? You thought, oh yeah, that reminds me of the early Christian desert fathers. Well, the early Christian desert fathers happened around the 300s. And this is what's interesting to me. One person decided that in order to keep living their spiritual path, they needed to go away, they needed to go off into the desert and spend time alone and be with the gospel. And then other people got inspired by that and came. It was like the first Burning Man. Everybody just kind of came to the desert and they formed a community, and they became the first monks, and there were men and women, so they became the first monks. What's exciting about that to me is the forming of a community around an idea that grips me, which is to evolve, to be spiritual. And also, I really like summer camp. My very first soul tribe was when I was 8. I was sent off to Catholic Youth Organization, CYO summer camp, and I loved it. It was like I went to camp and I felt, I couldn't have put it into words, but I felt, oh, these are my people. Of course I was with a bunch of kids my age. We were in the woods, and and we got to sing around the campfire, and we got to go swimming, and we got to eat together, and we got to sing. We got to do arts and crafts. I just loved it. I loved it so much. And I felt as if I had I know that at one of the campfires one night, I really had my first experience of oneness. We were singing, and I remember having this feeling of connection with everybody in the room, and I didn't know what to call it, but I did associate it somewhat with God. I don't think we were even singing Catholic songs. We were just singing camp songs. There was something about it that felt holy to me, even though I wouldn't have known what the word holy was. And that is my experience of a soul tribe. Now, I want to talk just a tiny little bit about the Desert Fathers, just to give a little bit of history to the history buffs. The earliest Christian monks inhabited the desert land in the Middle East. And they left a doctrine mostly expressed in rules and traditions. And they built their way of life around connecting to the gospel, the Christian gospel. And they also built here's what one of the early teachers, who was called Abba Agathon. The brethren asked him, Abba, amongst all good works, which is the virtue which requires the greatest effort? He answered, forgive me, but I think there is no labor greater than that of prayer to God. For every time someone wants to pray, his enemies, the demons, want to prevent him, for they know that it is only by turning him from prayer that they can hinder his journey. Whatever good work a man undertakes, if he perseveres in it, he will attain rest. But prayer is warfare to the last breath. Okay? Interesting. Prayer, of course, involves an intimate discourse with God, with words spoken out loud, with words spoken interiorly, and all the thoughts and ideas they reveal. And it is a connection to the living God. So prayer was a lot of what they built that soul tribe around. I remember various tribes that I've been a part of. Some tribes that that I really wanted to be a part of, and other tribes that you just automatically were a part of. Like I was in the tribe of Our Lady of Fatima grade school with a navy blue wool itchy skirt, but I would have rather not been in that tribe when I think about it. But so right, sometimes you're just in a tribe. But here's a definition I want to work with today. A group of people meant to further a collective purpose. And this relates to our spiritual journey in an important way. What does your tribe support? Zach talked a little bit about what does your support? What does this tribe support? How does your tribe support your personal evolution, your spiritual unfolding, your journey to integration, wholeness, and oneness? Now, I believe that everything in our life is perfectly placed for our spiritual evolution. You know, I say that over and over again. So this morning when I was listening to Chris sing, I had one of those feelings of oneness and like, oh, I am just in the perfect place, the perfect time. I was so happy, you know, like spilled over me. I was crying because I felt so happy. And at the same time, you know, a couple weeks ago when I got sick from eating too much cake, you know, that was also perfect. That was perfectly orchestrated for my spiritual awakening. You know, like maybe you shouldn't eat so much sugar, whatever it is, you know. Right? So it's the beautiful moments of oneness, like when it's your birthday and everything's going right, and the moments when it's stinky and whatever you ate makes you feel sick, or you didn't get the right presents, or whatever it is, you know, whatever it is. All of that's for our unfolding. But there is something about finding your soul tribe that is really important. Ram Dass says we are all just walking our way home together. We're all just walking each other home. That's what he says. It's a very famous quote. We are all just walking each other home. And A Course in Miracles talks about at-one-ment. That is something that A Course in Miracles talks about. What it is when you get to the part of you that is the Christ or the Buddha or Spirit, when you are that, when what Cindy talked about today, when it's not your small self. It's the self that fills the room, that's peaceful, that recognizes, you know, the Christ in each of us, that light in all of our eyes. And I have been calling that at-home-ment lately. For some reason, that just struck me. It like at-home-ment. And I love what Chris said about that song. Home, at home with ourselves. At home with ourselves. And and as we're all walking ourselves at home with ourselves together, it is really important to pay attention to who we're hanging out with and why would we want to find a soul tribe, you know? I later, in my life, the soul tribe for me probably wasn't the kids as much as the counselors, because I later went on to be a camp counselor. I worked in recreation. I realized that my soul tribe was creating community with other people, meaningful community. Choice community. Even though I was sent to camp, it felt like a choice to me. The interesting thing was to be away from my family, and I could choose who I was there. For some reason, I felt freedom. You know, I'm a little kid, I'm 8, but nobody knows who I am. So I could be my own person. I think that was what it was. And the soul tribe for me was the camp counselors, or the people who put the camp together, you know, creating that community, which to this day, you know, is my is the thing I love the most. It's like creating a community where people can be their own self, where we can support each other to be our goofy self, our happy self, our unhappy self, our whole self, all the parts of us that we can feel safe to show up in. And that's why it's important to find your people, to find your tribe. Let's just agree that together is better. Okay, let's just agree. Together is better when we're talking about spiritual unfolding. And here are some ideas about finding your soul tribe. When you meet someone in your soul tribe, you will resonate. Members of your soul tribe are held together by spiritual magnetism. How do you find your tribe? Start where you are. Just start where you are and look around. They will be there. Believe that your tribe is already waiting for you. Give yourself up to sacred service. Because we're talking about a group of people meant to further a collective purpose, a greater than our own individual. That's another thing you recognize your soul tribe for. It's not just about you feel fulfilled. It's like we're doing something together, And there's many, many, many ways to do that. And you probably have more than one soul tribe. I know I do. I still have the camp soul tribe. It's still my tribe. I have the unity tribe. I have the weekend artist tribe. There's just a lot of things I have. I have the bike riding tribe. When I go on my bike ride on Monday, I feel a special, interesting, and strange connection to everybody who gets to ride their bike on a weekday. I can't explain it, but I just feel like we're in a secret club. We're riding our bike on a Monday. So, trust the universe to support your mission. Join in a cause or movement that is already accomplishing something worthwhile, or start your own. If one isn't around, start your own. People will be attracted to something that matters. Tribes arise when movements happen, and tribes choose their own leadership. A few words of advice. Watch your ego. Share your content, meaning, don't make people pay $100 just for everything that it's not a pyramid scheme. I'm talking about a tribe. Learn to collaborate. Speak your truth. I want to read something that from an inmate at Anamosa State Prison in Iowa. I met this guy because a couple ministers in Salem, Oregon at Unity said, I'm looking for some NVC support, nonviolent communication support, for a prisoner that came from, he was in Oregon and now he's in Iowa. And can you support him? And I said, well, I might not be able to visit him regularly because Anamosa is a couple hours away, but we can at least start emailing and talking. And let me tell you, I had a little trepidation about, do I have, room, time? But let me tell you that my connection with him has been more than given back to me by his being. But I want to read you this that he wrote to me, because he told me the story, and I said, would you just write this up, because I want my people to hear this. And he said I could. This is from Romeo Hardin. He's about 35. On May 21st, the Iowa Supreme Court ruled that juveniles who were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole are now eligible for parole effective immediately. I was 15 years old in 1996 when I entered the Iowa prison system, where I would be condemned to life. And at that time, a juvenile life sentence was not eligible for parole. So, with that, at 15 years old, condemned for life, no possibility of parole. Much has changed with me as a person since then, and much has changed with society. We now benefit from the accepted scientific evidence that the portion of the brain which makes decisions isn't developed until around the age of 25, which means that children still have a chance to grow, develop, and habilitate or rehabilitate. Life without parole meant that I was declared irredeemable. It meant there was no conceivable prospect of rehabilitation, and I was swept under the rug of the prison industrial complex. It meant within the prison system, I have nothing to lose, don't mess with me. The I have nothing to lose, I have life, that perception of self became my mantra and my defense mechanism. It offered an extra layer of protection, and protection security was what I needed most as a child in the adult prison. I grew into this self-image and often resorted to violence to defend the image. The violence led to Iowa Department of Corrections officials sending me to a more secure and intense prison system. My arrival at Oregon Department of Corrections was a culture shock. There was a more organized structure reinforced by brutal violence. He talks about there were two men in particular who were in solitary, who were about to come out and join the general population, who had a pact going. These two people, for some reason, had gone in with a 5-year sentence and a 10-year sentence, but whatever transpired, they made a pact with each other to try and get as much time added to their sentence as possible. And they did that through violence. So everybody in the prison was really nervous about those people coming out. As Romeo says, they were at the top of the pecking order and revered by all of the hardened convicts. He says, I hadn't formed an opinion yet. I was just listening to the increasing discussions about them. Now, in the meantime, in Oregon, Romeo had been in a nonviolent communication group, which is what he wanted support for in Iowa. And at that time, let's see, an associate of mine had a 20-year life sentence, making him eligible for parole. And this guy said he thought they were stupid, the guys who had the pact to get as many years added on that everybody knew about, but that he understood it because he thought, why are you throwing it away? You know, but and then Romeo reacted, well, you know, I'm a lifer. And the friend realized, the friend realized that and said, oh, I'm sorry. So right then and there, Romeo and that man made a different pact. Well, first the man said, I admire you for everything you're doing here, because Romeo was taking classes and doing as much as he possibly could to make his life different. So they made a new pact. They made a pact that they would try to get a different kind of recognition. They would try and get as many anything possible, degrees. They would study as much. They would do whatever they can. So this is what he says. I once heard it said that your mess is your message and your test is your testimony. The word contest, to contend or compete, happens to come from the Latin testi, which means witness. God is good, and I am witness to this fact in a very ironic way. When we began the contest, I had life without the possibility of parole. As a result of the contest, I now have a high school diploma, paralegal associate's degree, certificates of completion of psychology course, philosophy course, Buddhist precepts, personal growth, anger management, handling control, and healthy relationships, victim impact, Toastmasters, Pathfinders, and the most impactful, 96 hours of nonviolent communication. Now I have something for the parole board. Hi, Sunday school. I chose to read Romeo's story because it shows me how he created a tribe in a place where you think you might not be able to find anybody. And in circumstances that I have to say is my worst nightmare, you know, being in prison. And then the other thing is that I know that it is important for us to find our tribe and to resonate with the people we are with, and to grow our consciousness and grow our tribes, and invite people in and work for something that is greater than ourselves. And at the same time, spiritual evolution, I'm pretty sure that for the Christ and for the Buddha, here's what their tribe is all sentient beings. So all sentient beings, and here's how we can measure, if we want to ever measure our spiritual evolution, how big is your tribe? I mean, we definitely want to go with the tribe that supports us and feels like us and work together, but we also want to keep opening our heart so that someday we can be like the Christ or the Buddha, and everybody is our tribe. Let's take an offering for unity.